Squadro.
Here, voting.
Okay. John Bench. Susan Allen.
I'm here. I wasn't planning on voting, but I can.
Okay, we might need you. John Eisenhower.
Here, same as Susan. I can vote if need be.
Okay, Ingrid Kashmar.
Here, voting.
Okay, so John and Susan, you guys can figure out who's voting and just let me know. Heidi Lawson. Okay, Jessica Stewart.
Here, voting.
Thank you, Jessica Bass.
Heather, you missed Jim Sawyer.
I did miss Jim Sawyer. I'm sorry. Jim Sawyer.
Here, voting.
Thank you, Jim. I have that. Sorry about that. Thank you. Carrie Hayes.
Here, voting.
Okay. Roger Sanamon.
Here, not voting, as far as I know, unless you need me.
I think you are voting.
I was gonna
I'm
say-
voting. Here, voting. All
Yeah, I
right.
was gonna say, I think we need you. All right, Jennifer Bonilla.
Here, I think I'm not voting.
Okay. Gary Burr.
Here, not voting.
Okay. Tom Reeve.
Here, voting.
Darcy Throckmorton.
Here, I think I'm voting then, right?
I think so. Aaron Brown.
Here, voting.
Voting. Okay, thank you. And then do we have Tammy Tripler?
Here, voting.
Okay, great. Richard Davis, Marissa Rosensky, Emmy Sawyer, Lindsay Staples, Amy Palmer, Carrie Alley, Darlene Sumner, and I'll just go through Frenchboro, Christina Shuey, Rachel Bishop, and Mabel Lunt. Okay, I think we have everybody. So hi, welcome everybody. I am going to just for a reminder, we'll go to public comment soon. So public comment, I'll go over to the attendees. If you have a comment, raise your hand, I'll call on you. I'm gonna ask us to do the same thing. I will still toggle between my two screens, but if someone from the board throughout this meeting has a question or a comment, if you guys could try and do the raise a hand piece, that will also help me. Before we hit public comment, I do just want to say to everybody that our last meeting 2 weeks ago was a great meeting, a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, a lot of constructive feedback, thoughtfulness. Mark and I, after that meeting, had a conversation and really discussed some of the next steps and directions with respect to the calendar. We felt this meeting was very important. At that time, 2 weeks ago, I think we talked about maybe having a workshop as opposed to a meeting. I chose to do a meeting purposefully as opposed to a workshop because of the comments that were given and the dialogue that I was having with Mark. I'm going to turn it over to him because I think he has a few things that he needs to say with respect to the calendar and our focus tonight.
Thanks so much, Heather. I'll try to be brief. Good evening, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity we have tonight to consider feedback and information specific to teaching and learning. I think we can all agree it's one of the most important things we do. Over the past several weeks, we've been very fortunate to receive a lot of questions, comments, and feedbacks from parents and staff and board members in support of calendar considerations for next year. In doing so, I really want to thank everyone for their participation in the process and acknowledge the historical strong support we've all had, we've received in doing what's best for our kids and our schools. I want everybody to know that your questions, your input, and your feedback has really helped shape our work and our recommendations to the board. That's really important. To be completely fair and honest, we don't have all the answers to all the questions raised to date, and there's still questions coming in. Additionally, timing is everything. I'd be remiss to move anything forward, any change without the support, strong support of parents, staff, and the board. In fairness, I've not answered all the questions due to the fact that we're making adjustments as we receive feedback. It's not an excuse, it's an acknowledgement. And it's important to answer all those questions. I know that, and provide that feedback to everyone. As your superintendent, I recognize the importance of doing what's best for our kids. That has to be first and foremost in all of our minds. I do believe release time for teachers and instructional staff is key in support of a standards-based system of teaching and learning. However, it's equally important to identify what our goals are and explore all the options that we want to achieve in those goals. That stated, I also believe we shouldn't compromise or endanger the continued support we've had from our parents, our staff, and our elected officials. The calendar, I believe, should be a vehicle to ensure consistent and equitable delivery of instruction, while also supporting professional development, response to intervention, and the ability for instructional staff to review student work, data, and best practice. Given the need and the importance of these components, and in consideration of all the feedback we received to date and will receive, the proposed draft calendars reflect on either end of the spectrum what it could look like. It's not a fait accompli. If we are to move forward with any added release time for staff, we must be clear about the fact that it's not about individual planning time. It must be about networking, collaboration, interdisciplinary architecture, professional development, all with a focus on what's best for our kids. Pandemic's been tough, and we want to get our kids back to school to in-person learning, all of our kids, 5 days a week. I think we can all agree on that. In doing so, I recommend an ad hoc subcommittee comprised of instructional staff, admin, and board members be established to review calendar information and present recommendations to the superintendent and the board no later than January of 2022. That is aside from this process we're undergoing right now. I fully intend to bring a final recommendation to the AOS board after reviewing the feedback and the comments we have. And I hope people will see and know that we've listened very intently and that we're incorporating that feedback in our final recommendation. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity before us. I look forward to presenting the board with this final recommendation in April. I look forward to the opportunity to pilot this work with my colleagues to build capacity for student programming, both within our schools and with our community partners through the support and approval of our school board. Thank you, Heather.
All right, thank you, Mark. I'm going to open it up to public comment. We have 4 members of the public, and if anybody, so I guess before I do that, there have been a couple of pieces of public comment that came in written, and as far as I understand, they are attached to the agenda, correct? Okay.
That is correct. There was one additional that came in this afternoon in addition to the 3 we'd already received.
Yep. Okay, so those are attached. There are 4 members that are a part of this public, and if anybody does want to make a comment during this public comment period, please raise your hand and I will call on you. Okay, I'm not, Patrick Skate, please.
Hi, thank you. So I asked this question at the high school meeting, and I'll ask it here as well. And I realize that there's not going to be an answer or back and forth, but I still have not heard anything about what metrics would be used to measure success. So it's being referenced now as a pilot, and there's not been any mention of what metrics will be used to determine success or failure. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Anybody else? All right, seeing no other hands, I will move on to the approval of the minutes from March 8th, 2021. Is there a motion?
So moved. Jennifer?
Thank you, Jennifer.
Second, Christie.
Thank you, Christy. Are there any comments, edits, changes? Hold on, I gotta open my thing and see if there's any hands. Okay, not hearing any, I will go through the roll call or the voting call. Todd Graham,
Approved.
thank you. Teresa King Leclerc,
Approve.
Heather Jones, approved. Dwayne Bolt,
Approve.
Robin Sue Tapley,
Approve.
Lily Simis,
Approve.
Christy LaSquadra.
Approve.
All right, Susan and John, what's the verdict?
Approved.
Okay, thank you. Ingrid Kashmar,
Approve.
Jim Sawyer,
Approved.
Jessica Stewart,
Approve.
Carrie Hayes,
Approve.
Roger St. Amand,
Approve.
Tom Reeve,
Approve.
Darcy Throckmorton,
Approve.
Aaron Brown,
Approve.
and Tammy Tripler.
Approve.
Okay, thank you. Now we move on to our discussion item, which is the purpose of our meeting today, the special meeting, which is the 2021-2022 draft calendar, school calendar options. Mark, do you want to spearhead this, or is it Julie?
No, I can start, Heather. I basically wanted to just make sure people were aware of the information that we've attached to the agenda. So we have I mentioned in my remarks, you see two draft calendars, one with weekly early release days, and another one without weekly early release days. And when Patrick mentioned it, but when I use the word pilot, I should have been more careful with that. I do see an opportunity through the discussions and the feedback to look at some other options and possibly. In addition to those, I would like, with your permission from Matt, he and his staff have worked very, very hard on a proposal to be able to walk through that. I hope if he's given the opportunity to do that, people will see that through the forums and through the feedback, Matt has worked very, very hard to incorporate many of the pieces that people brought forward. In addition, and I'm pleased to go about this the way the board would like, but we can go through each of the surveys and pull out some themes. I'm not sure how the board would like to proceed with that. We did release that yesterday, and that is unedited and for everybody to see. So it's attached to the agenda. So, I don't know if there are questions about those first two calendars, Heather, or how you'd like to proceed.
Yes. So what I would like to do is I would like to offer some other clarifying some pretty solid clarifying information to my opening for you. And then after that, I think it would be best if you pull out, hopefully everybody has looked at the survey results, but I think it would be wise for you, Mark, to pull out some of those themes that you've seen. And then, we can do questions around that if there are any, and then we can have Matt speak to his piece. After our last AOS meeting, or during our last AOS meeting on this topic, there were a lot of questions asked, but there were also a lot of great ideas, concepts, ways forward. And one of the things that we need to do, this idea of the early release, I think came from a very good place, a very genuine place, and a place of need. However, one of the things that was identified is we might need to step back, roll back time, go back to what's the purpose, what are we trying to achieve, what are our goals? And then build out from there, explore all the options to achieve those goals. So So then this is where we talked a little bit about having, and you referenced it, Mark, an ad hoc committee to then identify those and then explore the options so that for 2022, 2023, there is potentially a different calendar, but the work has been done. My understanding from our conversations, you have represented two calendars here, and it's, sort of the two extremes of what it could look like. However, in April, based on everything that you have heard, and we have heard, questions haven't been answered because the truth is we need to put together a group of people to, again, identify these goals and answer the questions and figure out what is right for students, staff, teachers, and administration. So in April, you will come to us with a recommendation that may include an early release each month, but is not a weekly early release, but is an opportunity to provide some time for collaboration and other learning for teachers.
Correct.
So I just wanted to be very clear about that, which is why people haven't received a list of questions. It's why questions haven't been answered, because there really is a rollback that is needed, and to look at this in a more thoughtful, thorough way. And it's not to say that it wasn't thoughtful from the start. It's just that we have to step back. And Mark, you're nodding, so thank you.
That's correct, Heather. Thank you.
Right.
That is my intent and my plan.
Are there questions from board members on that before we move on to the survey piece? I'm trying to look at the frame and my list, and I don't see any hands coming up. All right, Mark, if you would like to take over and pull out some of the common themes that you at least acknowledge from the survey. You're muted, Mark.
These are pieces that I've pulled out, and I certainly don't want anybody to think that I'm glossing over or leaving out anything. There's a ton of information. It's good stuff. So I've read it 3 times. I plan to read it again, and probably a 5th time, because you see things that you may not have pulled the first time. The first piece I want to reference is the letter to the board was on March 8th before the survey, and that's Ursula Hanson, Jay Freelander, and Deidre Swords. They posed some very good questions. The understanding of what the days and hours would look like. Just to that point, I hope that Matt's presentation will answer much of that in terms of a metric where people can actually look at a time schedule and have that information drilled down. What time is a late start? Again, that will be answered here later on in the presentation. The other piece too that I pulled out was the equity piece. In whatever we do or consider, it's really important that we do not create a system of haves and have-nots, and make sure that we're very supportive of our community in its entirety. And moving forward, other comments, Erica Wagstaff, justification for reduction in class time if this were to move forward, and research and evidence, we alluded to that. The number of hours and the justification, and then also the reference point for the Maine Department of Education and other minimum standards. So I think this is all important work for that subcommittee to drill down. And there was also questions about professional development time and how that's has contractual implications. Eric Reinhold also submitted some great feedback. That was originally came through the high school, but it's incorporated here. The plan to replace learning hours if there is a reduction in instructional time. And also the point, well taken, and I think you mentioned this, Heather, why these changes now in light of current conditions during pandemic and loss of instructional time. And this was I think, a really important point. Do we as parents have any agency in influencing this schedule, or has it already been decided? A great point. And the absolute yes to the answer, do parents have agency? Yes, they do through their boards. And I think this is an example of this. And also, has this already been decided? No, it is not a fait accompli. And I might add to that, just to remind everybody, the calendar is the purview of the board. It's not set by administration. We make recommendations. But certainly that rests with the final approval rests with the school board. The instructional day, that is management of the schools, schedules and times and whatnot. And so that does rest with administration. But again, not to be lost in the fact that as administrators, we report to boards. And so we're accountable for what we do or do not do. Also, the piece of can we view the results of the surveys? And the answer to that is yes. And so anybody that links to that agenda can go back to this information even after this meeting. And will we see the results of surveys? Yes, and they are unedited. So just moving forward, the first piece of information we had, we also included, Selena did a wonderful job capturing all the questions and the comments. I'm not sure we linked that to the agenda, but we will do that because I want to make sure everybody has a complete listing. There's at least 3 pages of, well, there's a half a page of comments and then questions that were posed at a previous meeting, so everybody knows. And there are some answers to some of those that are typed in. So I think it's important that we provide that for the community board. So the first piece is the MDI, the high school survey to parents. And Matt, please jump in, but interesting to note the first piece, the largest percentage of feedback we had actually was grade 9 and grade 8. So it's interesting that, you know, those parents weighing in or coming to the high school, providing that feedback. I'm going to pull out some broad themes, but please jump in or we can go back to any one of these. Having teachers have more time to meet with students was certainly significant. Time for families to have appointments for their children without missing school. Sleep was a recurring theme. I kept seeing sleep over and over and over. The need for additional time for students and the biological piece connected to high school students. The theme of providing teachers and instructional staff with time and the professional respect to collaborate with one another. And I just appreciated that folks recognized that the ability to network with their colleagues is really important. And the support for mental and physical health, rested students and teachers, quality versus quantity, and the theme of support for teachers came over and over and over. That resonated with me. Another theme that emerged was this individual felt it was better for students to begin the day, again, a bit later, transitional piece. The feeling that a late start, and again, this is high school only, a late start being less disruptive than full professional development days or days where subs are needed to cover students, cover teachers attending meetings. And I might add under Matt's proposal, and he'll get into this, Matt is not proposing any weekly release for early release. He's looking to accomplish this work embedded within his schedule. Again, the need for sleep and continued support, those things continued to emerge throughout that survey. Matt, is there anything transportation came up as a question, and in talking with Matt, we're confident administratively, we can work out the details and logistics of transportation. But busing and transportation were themes. This was one that I pulled out and was essential to me in framing thoughts. Question was, why focus on this now? It feels like energy needs to go into finding ways to reintegrate our students back to a normal high school experience, as opposed to removing time from students when they need to be back in school full time. Concerned about less instructional time, transportation, loss of instructional time, sleep, later start. So, but to the question of, I support the proposal for late start. 56% of the respondents indicated affirmative, 18% unsure, but I found that to be interesting. Matt, do you have any other observations or things that you'd like to add in regard to the high school parent survey or any of the forums that you did?
Not right now. I'll bring them up when I talk more later. Thank you, though.
Those are some very general themes, Heather. I don't know if that was helpful, if you want me to continue or stop at this point.
I'll take some questions. I see Leila, you have your hand up.
Mark, is that 56%? Was that for a late start that we're in favor of it for a late start every day, or just that Wednesday? Are we just talking about the Wednesday?
Wednesday, Lily. Thank you for that clarification. Yes, that was the question was, thank you. I support the proposal for implementation of a weekly 1 hour later start on Wednesdays. Yes, that was 56%. Thank you.
Steve.
I appreciate that survey was supposed to be about the late start, but in reading the comments, I still find that the public is generally confusing those two issues. The question of my kids need sleep, they need a late start every day. I just think, unfortunately, they're too close. They're too closely related that most people are not separating them. And so I thought the comments were really good, but it's hard to separate comments about a late start versus the shift in time in my mind. But I appreciate that that's what we tried to do, but I still find in conversations outside of these meetings, it's very muddled what the difference is. But I don't know how to unmuddle.
Okay, thank you, Christy. Are there other questions from board members around the survey results, whether it's high school or the K-8? I think if everybody's read through, I don't know that we have to go through and pull out common themes for all of them. But if there are questions, I'm happy to hear them. Christy?
This isn't a question, but I guess a theme that I noticed with the teacher survey, and this might go back to, the later. One thing that concerned me is that the number of teachers who commented that if we had an early release, they would not participate because they have children that they're obligated to drive home or care for. And I'll be honest, my initial response is, well, other people have to get childcare. That's part, but that might be the reason why somebody became a teacher or an ed tech, so that their schedule would match their children. And maybe that was a lifestyle choice that in designing this schedule, I think we need to respect that as well. We need to treat teachers like professionals, but keep in mind that maybe they made this choice to be with their children or have that schedule match. And so I was concerned that if there was, besides that, and then the other issues were ed techs writing in that they're being used in some programs to design the programs for the kids in the afternoon. And so, like Mark, you brought up the inequity piece for families, and what I'm worried about is the inequity piece for our staff. We already have an inequity of time from school to school and high school to K-8. We already have an inequity of time for ed techs and teachers. And so I guess to me, like part of this committee work could really be to put our heads together and figure out how do we make it so that everybody's getting the time. I mean, some teachers said they don't need the time. Some teachers are desperate for the time. Some teachers, so it feels like we don't really know yet what it is our teachers need. And I think that's what Heather hit on is what is the goal and how do we fix it? And I'm 100% supportive that the teachers need time. They need planning time, collaboration time. We need less time of our teachers being pulled out of our classrooms to attend meetings, but how do we figure it out? That I feel like we just haven't really hit on what that answer is yet. But I think all these discussions are great that we're trying to figure it out.
Thank you, Christy, for pointing those out, because I think those are some of the key pieces that will be a part of any subcommittee that is put together in discussing this. Mark.
I'd also like to add along those themes, the equity piece really resonates with me. I don't want any parent or family this to be a burden on them. And I think it's important to identify, but then after we identify, build out capacity with our community partners for what programs would be available for families and students to support them. It just shouldn't be rolled out as a take it or leave it. It should be rolled out thoughtfully so that we have those supports in place for families should they choose to access them. And that's something that we've learned over through this process as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Todd, your hand was up and then went down.
Well, you mentioned me, so
okay.
I would just ditto what Christy said, but it would be maybe I missed it, and usually I'm very careful about reading everything, but it would have been nice to hear more from the high school faculty. I don't think that we heard enough from them in these surveys. In fact, I'm not even sure I saw a complete survey of high school teachers in this agenda. So I think we're missing that component as well.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have questions, Marie?
Yeah, I sort of wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Christy brought up, and is that I kind of feel like, Mark started off by saying we want to put a calendar out that's consistent and equitable. I feel like what we're seeing for the high school is that we have a problem. We have a couple problems identified. One is that kids need more sleep. We have another problem that's been identified. Teachers need more time. We are choosing to solve those problems by starting school later. As one thing we're doing. But as Christy said, that creates, in my mind, actually two more inequities that we have to be really careful about. One is, if we were to move forward with a later start time for high school, are we able to say, will it pass the red face test, the straight face test, whatever that test is, where all of our students have equitable access to take advantage of that late start? And what I mean is, kids that take the bus, are they still going to be picked up? Are we still, working with a transportation system that requires kids in downtown Bar Harbor, kids in Hancock, and kids in Otter Creek, sort of randomly all over the place to be picked up hours and hours before school starts? Even if it's, starting at 8:45, are we providing equitable access to that for kids that don't drive, for parents that work, both, two parents are working and can't bring their kids in early to take advantage of that? So I probably said at the last 3 board meetings, I'll probably say it the next 4, but I'm looking forward to us solving the problem of transportation, because we can't just start the school later and say that everyone has equitable access to that perk without changing significantly how we're operating our buses. The second part of the consistent and equitable that I I feel like it is becoming problematic if we were to move forward with a later start time. Is the second half of the problem the later start time is solving is providing an answer to teachers having the planning time that they need. But what that's doing, it looks like to me, is it's sort of institutionalizing inequities between high school, what it means to work at the high school, have a high school position versus what it means to work in an elementary school position. And so although since I've been on the board and probably long before, the push has been to standardize the district, common calendar, one contract, we've been pushing for that. But I think we're at a point now where we're pushing so hard to keep things the same that we are potentially institutionalizing inequities that are going to be very hard to back out of. And I would just echo, the answer isn't to, not do this because high school teachers get exactly what they need in planning time, because they deserve that. But the elementary schools are different, and they're meeting different community needs. And we owe it to them to figure out how to not put a calendar or an academic schedule forth that makes it so inequitable depending on what building you work in for what you get for planning time. I don't know if that's contractual or what it is, but it's a problem that is going to be created if we move forward with this without thinking about how to make that up. We've seen consistently from all the surveys in many places that parents and communities right now are, as you stated, Heather, are not interested in doing significant reductions to academic time. So we got to figure out another way to do it. So those are my consistent and equitable comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. I have Jessica Stewart, and then I will probably turn this over to Matt to speak to his proposal.
Maybe mine is irrelevant now. I'm just wondering if there's like two different languages we could, like a term that we can use to describe to be clear about whether someone's talking about the each day beginning a bit later or the Wednesday late start, because I feel confused when people are commenting. I'm not sure which they're commenting on at some point.
Well, Jessica, honestly, I think you just validated what Christy was saying as far as people are confused. So thank you. I hear that. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, when we're talking about a late start, we're talking about Wednesday.
Is that a good segue to me?
It's a great segue.
Okay. So the first thing, I just want to get that question completely clarified. We are no longer at the high school requesting or considering the idea of a professional release time, that was what we were talking about with the starting school later on Wednesday, which would have been the mirror image of the early release proposal from the K-8 schools. We have taken that off as a solution to these other problems that we're trying to talk about. So we don't have to worry about that confusion anymore as far as what we're proposing going forward. So I hope that's helpful in framing the rest of the things we're about to talk about. And I will say that that is because of some really good feedback that we got and things that we learned and processing that we did. We have had two forums. One had about 120 people in it. One had about 20 or so. We had the survey that we talked about. I know Todd was just referring to high school surveys. We didn't do surveys. We did individual conversations with each member of the high school faculty. And we can't really share that data because it's just way too personal and way too, it isn't, there's no quantitative metric that comes out of that. And we really learned an awful lot about how we are going to get better. Another thing I want to point out about this whole process is we are in the middle right now of a normal cycle of continuous improvement that has a rhythm in a normal year. Every year we think about what are the structural things we want to do differently and better to help our kids and in doing so to help our teachers. This process has just become super, super public as we've worked through it, as we've worked through drafts, as we work through our thinking. Our brainstorming and our first drafts, our first ideas have been 100% exposed. And I think that has created some of this discomfort that's out there. So I want to point that out. We are always, pandemic or not, every year thinking about how we get better. So I just wanted to make sure people were aware of that. One more thing I want to say before I talk about what we'd like to do next year is that I want to say unequivocally and unabashedly, I am fiercely proud of the work that we've done this year, the work that our students have done, the work that our educators have done, the work that our families have done, the work that our board has done, the work that our community has done. What we have done collectively for our students and is incredibly good compared to, well, it's just good. It's just good. And I think we have to not take that for granted. It is a global pandemic that hasn't happened in over 100 years now. And what we've been able to provide our children is amazing. That's high school, that's pre-K, that's K-8. It's amazing. I'm proud to live in this community. That being said, it's not good enough for a non-pandemic year. We know that. And so the presentation, the ideas, the brainstorming we're doing are not about trying to recreate what we've done this year. It's about trying to learn the things that we've learned from, because there are always things to learn, and use that to make us better as part of that natural rhythm of a continuous improvement cycle. I'm actually getting a little bit emotional as I talk about this, because I really am, I mean it, I'm proud. So that being said, I'd like to talk about what our current thinking is for how we'd like to best support our students for next year. Give me a second while I try. There's a document I'd like to share. It's the document that I sent out earlier today. Share screen. Uh-oh. Never mind that. I'd have to go messing with my Zoom preferences and you'd all be awkwardly waiting for me. Most people have the document, so if you have a side screen, you can kind of look at it as we go through. And I apologize to those people who are watching online, but this will be a public document. One of the things I wanted to start with to kind of back up what I was saying a minute ago is one of my quotes. People have heard me say this a lot, a quote from Maya Angelou: do the best you can until you know better, which that's what we're always doing. We're always doing the best we can. And then we know better. So then when you know better, do better. That's really the mantra. Just keep going and doing better all the time. Some of the things we've learned this year, and these are just a few things that were particularly relevant to this exact conversation. Students are healthier, they're safer, they perform better, they perform more efficiently, and they behave better when they are fully rested, when they have more sleep. When given the time and structure to collaborate as professionals, educators create innovative and impactful learning experiences for students. With explicitly defined time to meet with teachers outside of class, students learn better, and that's all students. And while students and teachers have been able to utilize the time that they've had this year, and I am fully, we'll talk about exactly how much time that's been, while they've been able to utilize that time in truly efficient and creative ways, the schedule that we built in response to the pandemic does not allow for enough post-pandemic in-class learning time. If you want to look at the next page, I've done a little bit of a breakdown on what that time actually means. There are the three columns in this year, in this table here, talk about 2018-19 was the last quote unquote normal year. So you can look at the comparison of the number of days, total student days versus that year, compared to the one we're in right now, compared to what our current thinking is for next year, as keeping in mind, we're in the middle of this continuous improvement planning cycle and nothing is set in stone by any means. Oh, thank you, whoever did that. Anyway, that's where you look at that 175 student days next year, which is 7 more than this year. If you look at the minutes, okay, particularly focus on the minutes in 2021. So if you look at that, please don't try to worry about the math. The minutes, it's a broad estimate. Nobody's standing there with a stopwatch, but this is basically just multiplying out numbers of class time. So if you look at that 31,680, that's the typical amount of minutes spent in class. And that is all class. That's class done fully remotely. That's class done when you're here. That's the time learning in school this year. Our current thinking for next year has a 44% increase in that time to over 45,000. Built-in time for focused learning support. Going back to equity, some of the great feedback we got on our last proposal was, sure, learning time, office hours, one-on-one, small group meetings with students to help support them in their learning is great. And how are they going to do that on a Wednesday morning when they're also sitting on the bus? So 0 of that time is built in this year, and people are still able to access it this year in ways. But in order to make it equitable for all students, in this current plan, we've built in another 3,100 minutes for focused learning support. A draft of the plan that went out said something about an RTI block. RTI stands for response to intervention. That was actually selling it a little short. It's more called focused learning, and focused learning is for everyone. Full days of in-person learning. That means all the kids are here all day. There's not an early release, everything. If you look at that middle column, 74 days this year, our kids will have spent in the building with their teacher. And those are the ones who are in one of the cohorts. And the only reason that number is that high is because we were able to bring the kids back last week. The kids have been here 33 days until the middle of March, right? The feeling that people have that the kids are not getting enough time. This is why. This feeling is real. This is why. And this is also, I'm trying to illustrate that is not in any way, shape, or form what we're proposing to come back to next fall. In a version of the plan that I like best, 173 of our days next year of the 175 will be full days where the students are here all day. 2 of those days will be partial. Full remote. I mean, we had 20 days this year of full remote learning. That's including the 3, and that is not including any Wednesdays. That's the 3 weeks at the beginning of school, the 2 weeks after the first 2 weeks in January, and then the 1 day a week and a half or so ago. 20 days full remoting. If you were a hybrid student, you spent another 37 days learning at home while your peers were in the classroom. So that's what we've been dealing with this year, and that's why it feels like the students have lost out on so much time. And then I'm going to circle back to what I said to start this thing. I am incredibly proud of how well our educators and our students have pulled that off. The kids are doing, in the face of a pandemic, it's inspiring how well our educational community is doing. So the next piece, focused learning time. The idea of focused learning time in 2 blocks a week. There are 3 different levels of priority. Number 1 is intervention. That is the student is struggling with something, and some one-on-one time or small group work time with their teacher will be the thing they need to help them push that up to the next level. That happens to every student in every class. There is no student who doesn't need that at some point during the school year. It doesn't matter whether you're the student with the highest standard achievement scores across the board or somewhere in the middle or otherwise. Every student needs that at some point. Extension. The second level of priority is extension. That means full classes will be able to get together and have a little bit of extra time. This could be a time for prep before a big assessment or a big lab. It could be extra finishing up a science lab. It could be whole class work where kids the teacher can grab those students, the whole class, for a little bit of extra time each week. And then there's enrichment pieces, which may be beyond the class. That could be club time. That could be time for students to participate in intramurals or have a workout session with their teacher or work in the art studio. It's a time for students who don't have those other 2 things going on to be able to really take full advantage of the experts that are here in the building. Those are the level of priorities. That's what that focused learning time is. And I will say that plan is something that is for every kid, whether you're a kid who has all AP classes and has an incredibly demanding and time-consuming schedule, or someone who doesn't. Everybody needs that time, and they need it differently as the different parts of the year go by. Excuse me. I suspect this is Julie. Julie, can you go down to the last page, please? So one of the questions that we hear most frequently about our plans for changing for next year is, why would we make these changes coming out of a pandemic? Why can't we just get back to normal? Why can't we get back what we lost? And my counterpoint to that is, it is precisely because we're coming out of a pandemic that our students need us to make these changes in this continuous improvement cycle. Now that we know better, we have to do better. We know better. We can't just go back to what we did before we knew better. That would be wantonly destructive, to overstate it. So anyway, those are the points that I wanted to share about our thinking, and a couple other things that have come up that I had kind of prepared those thoughts ahead of time. A couple other things that I've thought of as we've gone through. One of the things that we learned that I didn't put on that we have learned, and we suspected it, and it's become confirmed: 80-minute class time was too long. Those 80-minute classes were not ideal. Some of that time was wasted time in general. There are some days that it wasn't. So a 70-minute class time is a better use of that time. So trying to go back to 80 minutes because that's what we did before would be going backwards. We've heard a lot of talk about equity and consistency. And I think those are important pieces that are in this proposal that we've put together here for the high school. And again, it's a work in progress. It's not a finished, signed, sealed, and delivered. A couple of things I wanted to respond to that people had asked questions about before. One of them is really easy to answer. Marie asked about, is even though we're starting later, are there still students getting on the bus 2 hours before school? That's a great question, because that was compounding our earlier start time before, is that we were having kids getting on the bus 2 hours. No, the answer to that is no. That's not happening this year. The earliest the kids get on the bus now, except for the one bus that we send to Hancock, which I think they get on that at about 7:30. The earliest anybody else gets on the bus is after 8 o'clock. So that's good. We've got that question. And then I would also request, I fully acknowledge the piece about equity. And I want to make sure people remember that equity and equality are not the same word. And I also acknowledge that there is an emerging potential equity problem about the high school schedule. I would ask us, please, not to try to balance that equity on the back of the health of our teenagers. Let's not bargain away that the gains we've made in their health, their well-being, their safety, their performance to fix an adult problem. So those are the things I wanted to say. And again, I really do appreciate the feedback that people have given, the board, the community, the families, the students themselves, the educators. Some of the feedback's been supportive. Some of the feedback has been constructive. Some of the feedback's been unfriendly. And it's all really useful in helping us do this. And in the end, I believe that we do have the trust of our board, and our community is something that has allowed us to do those great things that I was talking about before. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I just appreciate that trust and the open dialogue.
Thank you, Matt. Carrie, I see your hand. Hang on. So I'm going to open it up for questions. I am requesting, because we have about 41 people attending, if you put your hand up. So Carrie, I have you.
Thank you. Matt, I was at both of the forums that you held in the previous weeks, and really appreciate all the information that came out of those. I think the one that we had last week that only about 20 people showed up to, was really valuable because you really worked on explaining that focused learning time. And at first I wasn't sure exactly what we were talking about. It sounded to me like it was something that the kids had to seek out, but as it turns out, it's that the teachers would assign kids to what they needed on a week by week basis, which I think is really valuable, so that as the semester goes on or the year goes on, kids are getting help when they need it. They might not need the same thing in week 2 that they need in week 15. And so I was hoping maybe you could just give a little bit more of an explanation for all the people who didn't hear that, of exactly how the assignments of that focused learning time works, because I think it's valuable for people to understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie, for that opportunity. We've worked really, again, it's a work in progress. It's a developing plan, and it's one that Julie Kablinski and I have spent a lot of time talking about over not just the last week, but the last long time. So I'm actually gonna, if you don't mind, ask her to kind of step in and share some of those ideas about the intervention, the extension, and the enrichment pieces.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I would want to bring us back to 8 years ago when I was first hired. I came from Ellsworth High School, and one of the new initiatives they were putting forward was this focused learning. And everybody was sort of paying attention to it because it was taking hold and growing. And I would often be asked by our own teachers, when are we going to do that? And we were pretty rigid on our schedule, so it just didn't seem like we could fit it in. But it has come up every year as a recurring need. And this pandemic has really said, oh my goodness, we've basically had a focused learning type element with our office hours. We definitely want to push for it now. And that came out of our interviews. We did one-on-one interviews. They were each at least a half an hour long with our teachers to see what they've learned from this experience. It was very comprehensive. The process itself is used by a lot of schools throughout the state of Maine. They purchase an app. It's called EduSkedge, Y-O-U. And basically, it's a tagging system where once a week you pull your kids and you type in their names and you tell them where they're going. And they also have a list of priority. So your priority number 1 is intervention. And your priority 2 is extension. As Matt had explained, that might be, you know what, we need to review for this test. I'm going to tag you all and we're going to do a review. But if I'm doing poorly in another class, I might get stolen. But usually the teachers negotiate a little bit and say, let me take them for this one and I'll give you them next week, type of thing. And then the third one is enrichment. So that is the weight room, and maybe I couldn't access it after school, so I can ask to be tagged on that. But a teacher can steal me if I have another obligation. So it does build that into the application. And it's not, even though we would be piloting it because it would be special to us and we would have to work out our own kinks, it is not a new program. It is something that lots of schools have done, and we're learning from their experience and trying to tailor it to our own.
Thank you. I have Todd and then Christy.
Thank you. So I just wanted to go back to something that Matt had just said. You say that you know better to do better. What did you learn? What do you mean by that statement? You now know better. What is it that you now know better? Because that seems to be a pivotal point here,
We know a lot of things that we learn better. We have learned how that rested students are able to focus, and that they can do more with a rested mind in 70 minutes than they could ever do in 80 minutes before. That's the first thing that we've learned. We've learned that given the students the structured time within the day, and even when we did it on our Wednesdays this year, which wasn't as structured as we're planning for the future, we've learned that giving them that time, rather than asking them to come in before school or stay after to get individual or small group help with the teachers, helps them with their learning, the time is worth its weight in gold. We've learned that when you give teachers, and I didn't even mention this before, but when you give teachers the time, not just to plan, I think it's an important distinction between planning time, which teachers have for planning what they're going to do in their lesson that day, with setting up their technology, with putting grading assessments, with organizing their Google Classrooms and their PowerSchool. That's teacher planning time. That's not what we're talking about. It's important and it takes a lot of time. What we're talking about is when you give teachers structured time to work together, to collaborate, to build a new and innovative, different ways of doing things, they rise to the challenge. And that's what we're trying to talk about doing with some of those time hours before school next year. Those are some of the things that we've learned along the way.
So, so just trying to do some of this math here in my head, if you can help me with that. So it seems to me that we have 80 minutes of this focus time. And I know that at the forum, and I know some of this is based on all the information you shared with us at the forum that maybe not everybody knows, but if we have 80 minutes of focused learning time, and you had said that every student would be able to participate in this, and of course, I think equity will play a role in that. If what I just learned from Julie, some students can be moved based on their need ahead of people who desire the one-on-one time. So I'm hearing that could be a problem. But with 80 minutes a week, 532 students and 60-ish teachers, how did you calculate how many minutes every student is going to get for one-on-one time? And how does that really equate to taking them all out of class? I mean, it seems to me that we're talking about 8 or 9 minutes versus the 40 minutes of focused learning on, each day that we do this. And so what are your numbers? How did you come up, and how do you make that, how did you make that transition? And if this was about planning time and time for teachers to prepare so that they can do better, where are they getting that time to do that in this plan?
Matt, is that something that you can address now, or?
Yeah, I can halfway address it now. I think I can do a lot better job of addressing it at a future date.
Okay. And I just have, just 2 more points here, quick. One, I don't see that we have a K-8 discussion going on, and it sounds like we've been very silent on that, on where we were and where we're coming to.
We haven't been able to get there yet, Todd.
Okay.
And what's your last point?
That's it.
Matt, would you like to address what you're able to?
So I guess there was something that was, I think, a misunderstanding that I'd like to address. When Julie said that a person can be stolen, what we didn't do a great job of laying out was I had mentioned those 3 layers: the intervention, the extension, the enrichment. Those are in priorities. So when Julie said someone can be stolen, what she meant was if someone was scheduled to be in one of those enrichment or extension activities and a teacher needed them for intervention, the teacher could steal them from the enrichment for intervention. We're not going to have a bunch of kids getting bumped out of the way. I think that's an important distinction. As far as some of the other things about how we came up with the amount of time, it's not a scientific process. That's the amount of time that we could put together for this, to try it, to see if it works. If we tried to put those 40 minutes in every day, there would certainly be more time for those interventions, extensions, and enrichment, which would then also take away time from class. So this is where we are doing the best we can. to put together a plan that we believe will work. And we may come back after a year and say that was not nearly enough. We need to do more of that. We may come back and say that didn't work at all, which I doubt. Or we just adjust and do better when we know better.
Matt, can I just add to your point about the time? We did look at what other schools were doing and had 40 minutes was the popular number that seemed to be the most effective that people landed on. So we did begin with other people's learning to begin our discussion too. So it wasn't, just a shot in the dark. We were looking at what other schools were doing.
Thank you, Julie. I have Christy next. Thank you, Matt, too.
Sorry. I just said say, I like your schedule. I like this proposal. I am in favor of the later start time, having had 2 kids go through that high school and catching a bus at 6 a.m. in the morning to get to school, driving them early to get there to clubs and honor whatever that committee is called, National Honor Society meetings. I mean, I was driving a daughter to school at 7 o'clock every morning of the week for a different event. So I definitely get the hardship on families, the early morning stuff, all of it. And so I do like this. And I also say, to parents, there's parents who have asked a lot of questions who don't have kids in high school yet. And what I see at the high school is these teachers are 100% dedicated to these kids. They meet with kids. I mean, you've got in here 7:30 to 8:30 team planning. I guarantee there's a kid at their door at 8:15 who wants something, and that teacher will leave their meeting and meet with that kid. They are students who, before pre-pandemic, have favorite teachers' classrooms that they like to eat in, and they go and they hang out with their teacher during lunch, and their teacher gives up their lunch to hang out with their kids in their classroom. My kids never ate lunch in the cafeteria. They always all gathered in a different teacher's classroom where that teacher talked to them and hung out. And so I think the idea I think our teachers aren't getting as much time as this calendar makes you think they're getting. It's a great proposal, and I love trying to have these IEP meetings. It's probably better for working parents to have these meetings before they go to work. So I think that's all an improvement. My question is really for you, Julie. When you talked about the tagging system, in all of that being said, these teachers who already don't have enough time, how are they going to get, is there a concern about them being able to get that tagging done twice a week, or is it something, I don't know, like, have you talked to the teachers in your interviews, and what are the ideas around that, how they can get that done?
Yeah, well, we haven't been trained on the app, but I do know that it just becomes routine. By the end of the week on Fridays, they're making their plans for the following week, and they're tagging kids, and we look at the schedule on Monday, make sure everybody is tagged. So it is a matter of getting used to it and into a routine. And also the real key element is getting ahead of things as opposed to reacting to things. So I'm planning for the week. I know we have an upcoming exam. I'm going to tag these kids, and I'm going to schedule them for a small group review or study piece. I'm teaching an AP course. It goes on for a semester. The second semester, I'm going to tag these kids bi-weekly and do test prep up until the exam. They might have to get pulled for something, but it'll be a standing meeting, and when they can come, and hopefully they can keep up. So we have the SAT coming up. We're going to offer some SAT prep, tag kids during this time, and we'll advertise it, and kids can say, I want to be tagged for that. There's really a lot. It's really about flexible learning time. And that's the one thing we have learned from this pandemic, is that flexible learning time allows us to respond to what we need at that time, as opposed to saying it just doesn't fit in the schedule. So what I have been warned about is once you do flexible learning time, you'll want more. I don't want to say that to scare anybody, but it really is just a new way of approaching time in an educational setting. And it's just more responsive.
Thank you. I have two more hands, and so I'll take those questions and then we will shift over to talk about the K-8 because we still have a few other things to tackle, including executive session. So I have Robin Sue next.
Okay. Just a couple of things. I know that transportation has come up. In this first block starting at 8:45, how does this affect the K-8 transportation? And on this, does this 2:30 to 3 mean the kids are in school? The high school is in school from 2:30 to 3, or are they getting out at 2:25? That's my first question.
No, the buses would go home at 2:25.
Okay. So like, how does this affect I mean, I've been trying to look for bus schedules on each of our individual school websites and I can't find them. I know for Connors Emerson, in the morning, the buses don't get there until like 8:15, 8:20. Can they really turn around and have kids for a high school there to start at 8:45? Or are the K-8s gonna go earlier? And then same thing on the other end, leaving at 2:25. I mean, I know that Connors Emerson, I think our buses typically are waiting anyway, so maybe that doesn't affect it in the afternoon, but I don't know about these other K-8 schools who are further away. And then, well, I don't know if you want to answer that or I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. The answer to those questions is we don't want the high school schedule to cause the K-8 daily schedule to have to change. There are some adjustments in the way we do things. The adjustments in the afternoon are not super challenging. The morning time, we're hoping to try to find an entirely different way to go about things. And we are getting closer down that path. It's not something that we're just saying it'll magically fix itself. We are really working on trying to adjust how we do busing so that we don't have changes in the high school schedule don't have to impact changes in the K-8 schedule, because that's
Okay.
that isn't going to help anybody.
Okay, so I'm assuming, will that be ironed out, we hope, before like we've made this decision? And I guess that sort of leads into my other question. I think my clarifying question is about, are we even voting on this? Because I've been told that admin just makes this change on start and end times of school, and that's not a voting AOS decision. So I guess if you could clarify that as well.
Mark, yep, please.
As I indicated earlier, the answer to the question is, in my experience, as a superintendent, as a principal, as an educator in my career, start and end times are set by management administration. That being said, like any other decisions we make, certainly we want to make sure that the board is informed and the board is comfortable with our decisions and supportive of our decisions. We would not want to be making decisions blindly that would not be supportive of our community and boards. We recognize that the ability to make those decisions is not a blank check.
Okay. So we could expect that we would see the transportation ironed out before this decision was made.
I think, as Robin Sue, if I may, I think as Matt said, we don't want to do anything that's going to disrupt the K-8s. I'll also say, number one priority for us in this operations position is to really look at transportation. Calendars aside, we are very siloed in our schools, and we really, really need to get our hands around networking. We do that informally. Our staff are great, but we do not employ any routing software. We don't employ any metric that we can use to see if there's a better way. And I believe there's a better way to do this while continuing to maintain the positions we have and actually be able to build this out in a better way. I can't promise you that work will be done on April the 12th, but I am very confident that we can navigate this without adversely impacting our elementary schools. I'm very confident of that.
Okay. And my last question is, these late starts, I might be confusing it with the Wednesday late start, but do these late starts, do we think are taking away the professional development days, or we're still having professional development days on top of these late starts.
So if I may, Heather, Matt's proposal does not have any release time built into it for the high school. And we will talk about elementary here coming up.
Okay. Jessica Stewart, you had your hand up. Do you still have a question?
My question was partially answered, and I'll let us move on.
Okay, thank you. So Maria, you got in under the wire then. So I'll turn it over for your question and then we're moving on.
Okay, thanks. So I have a clarifying question because I thought I had it straight, but now I'm confused. Mark just said Matt's proposal does not include any release time. So I think we're back to like the semantics of what words we're using that are confusing to me. So I've thought that when we bring the high school kids in later, we'll call it that, at 8:45, in the mornings, I'm looking at this schedule and I'm seeing that there's some team planning time. What's the difference between the networking and the team planning versus release time? I'm confused about that. So that's like my first question. And then I have my real question, if someone can answer that.
Matt, would you like to clarify that, please?
I would like to clarify that and the last question also. So when Mark said there's no release time, what he means is all 5 of our days of the week are the same. There's no special day that we come in late. The teachers do their team meetings, their collaborative work, that type of thing, during those 7:30 to 8:30 timeframes. So all 5 days, what Mark meant was all 5 days of the week are the same. To clarify the question before that about professional development days, there are in the teacher contract, there are 5 of those full day paid professional development days that would still have to be in our calendar. And that's a whole different part of the conversation. So I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that piece.
Thank you, Matt. All right, Marie, your question.
Okay, thank you. That's what I thought. So my question does revolve, I guess, around data you've collected about professional development time, the 5 days thing. Because I keep hearing over and over again that teachers are saying they really need this other time, whatever we call it, the team planning time, the common studies time, what that summarizes. So as we are considering planning for our calendar and rooting out the problems that we're trying to solve by coming in later or maybe leaving earlier, kids leaving earlier one day for release time, shouldn't we be seeing some data about what our teachers are saying about what those 5 days look like? And the reason I say that is I think when I started, I remember there's been a lot of initiatives, new initiatives that have happened over the past 5 or 6 years that teachers have had to relearn how to do this thing and relearn how to do report cards and adjust. I mean, they're doing relearning all the time, but they've had some heavy lifts that maybe just in the past 5 or 6 years. And I think we've heard about that, especially at our local boards. And so my question is like, how are those professional development days? Are there ways that those professional development days can better serve the teachers? So instead of a full day workshop where they're learning a new thing, and I'm just using my version of how to explain it. Maybe, is there a way that they can be more targeted to what individuals, maybe they just need more time that day. I don't know. So I think that that's important for us to see that the board and that the administration has talked to teachers about what is working for them about professional development days, those 5, and what maybe isn't working, especially in light of this past year. So that's one thing. And my second question, and it's not something that can really be answered, I imagine, but we're talking about this as a pilot for this 40 minutes of focused learning time. We're talking about it as something that is done in other school districts. We're talking about it as something that may need, I think Julie said, once you have some of it, you may want more. We're talking about this as a pilot. Why are we talking about it for 2 days? We have a structure that, I mean, my Wednesdays where I would say in my family were very different. Some of the other Wednesdays that other families I know had, they were like skiing and doing fun things and we were like not. which is fine. You know, we had to use ours in a certain way. So where's the data about what even just like one of these 40-minute focused learning sessions might do for our students and our staff and our teachers? Why is it 2? Is it just to even out the schedule, or, you know, what
I can quickly answer that question. It is because of, we have a lot of students who have schedules that may make it not accessible to them on one half of the day or the other. For example, students who go to Hancock County Tech Center are only here at MDI either in the morning or in the afternoon. There are students who do things where they go to work, or they have a partial schedule because they've earned credits. And so anyway, it's to have it on either half of the day. That's the primary reason. It's for equity of access.
Okay. Thank you. And Marie, to your other question, as far as I've sort of lost my train of thought here. I don't necessarily know that it's something that can be answered right now. Oh, I'm sorry, this is to the professional development days. I don't know that it's something that could be answered right now. I think it's a very valid statement and something that can be utilized as Julie administrators, they develop the professional development. So I think I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the thoughtfulness, and that is probably information that can be gathered and to continue to try and use our professional development days in the most effective and useful and efficient ways for our teachers. So I am going to move our conversation now to the K-8 calendar. As said earlier, Mark has attached to the agenda here 2 calendars, one with a weekly early release and one without a weekly early release. They represent sort of the extreme of the continuum, or the either end of that. And I'm happy to, I also tried to convey where Mark is going with this and where I think we need to go with this, meaning where we need to go with the calendar and that discussion, but I am happy to open it up to questions or comments. And if people will raise their, utilize the hand raising. Christy.
I guess I'd like to go back with we did that pilot, I don't know, was it this year or last year, where we added the 4 or 5 half days? Was that this year? So we don't really have, oh no, somebody's saying yes, or last year. And I hate to use this word, and I'm sorry, Marie, this isn't about you, to say what are the results of that pilot. And because I think people keep asking for data, like what is the data for this? What is the data for that? And I don't know how you quantify these changes. I mean, who's to say what the right data is? Is it an increase in graduation rates? Is it higher GPAs? Is it what colleges your kids get into? Is it how high your SAT scores? Is it how happy your kid is? Are they seeing their therapist less? I don't know. Like, there's a lot of data. Like, it's a very fair question to say, where's the data to support any of this? But I don't know how you figure out what that data really is. And I'm guessing as administrators, you're trying to figure out what that data is too. But we did the pilot, we did the half days, and we heard from some teachers, not all teachers, that those days were too full of not what they needed, like Marie was saying. I could totally support a weekly half day, but that's because it's not a hardship on my family, and I see the need, and I could, but I also see everybody else's comments and how hard it is, how it's creating inequities for kids, for teachers, for students. So, I think I think this conversation is great and it's really important, but I'd like to go back and say, did we see those 5 days helping? What did the teachers say? They didn't really they addressed it in the survey that they liked it this year. They didn't say whether it was not enough with the 6 or enough. I mean, where's Mark going to begin figuring out how many days to put in? Like, I guess that's where the question is. If we want him to come up with some middle ground, or 1 a month, or one every 6 weeks. How do we figure that out? And I feel like it really comes back to what have you heard from the teachers, and are they able to use that time?
Thanks, Christy. I'll just sort of open that up to, are there any principals that have heard anything from teachers, pro or negative about that time that was built into this year?
Heather, this is Julie. Can I clarify something?
Sure.
There were not, so last year was when we asked for the pilot. It was the year that got interrupted by the pandemic. So we had scheduled 4 Fridays. We had 2 of those Fridays. The principals reported back to the board exactly what teachers used them for, and that they were extremely happy to have that time. It was not taken over by time from the district, and it was not taken over by IEPs and meetings.
Okay.
We don't have data to say more as to how it worked because we didn't get the other 2 because of the pandemic.
Yep.
So I just want to clarify, that was last year. This year, starting in January, we've had the early releases on Thursdays. Those have had to be used for everything, for meetings, for some of the collaboration time that's happened during those times has been fabulous, but it has been the only time that people can get together. And so it has been used in a lot of different ways, but it's not the same. So Christy, just in terms of responding, I just want to, it's kind of like what that other thing was that was muddied with the early release and the late start. These things are subtle. They're really, really important to the working of how we support kids and how we really improve what we're doing. So I just wanted to clarify that last year was a partial experiment that didn't get played out, but had initial very favorable reviews. And this year is being used for a lot more kinds of things. And there are people who are happy and not happy, and it was done mid-year. So it was not part of a schedule that was designed from the beginning. So that's all I want to
Julie,
clarify.
thank you for that clarification. That is really helpful. Thank you. Are there other questions or comments? Marie.
Sorry, I can never find the electronic hand thing. I guess I'm asking for clarification. The 2 calendars that we have, they both say AOS 91. So they're not, sometimes we have a high school calendar that we're looking at, and we have an elementary school calendar that we're looking at, and they're sort of aligned, except for maybe sometimes they're not. So are we trying to do just align every single thing into one calendar, or am I making up how we usually do it? I need that clarified first before I ask my question.
Mark.
I'll just say this, I've served 38 years in education, and I know there are districts that have more schools than us, but it's beyond me how I think it's really important we have a single calendar, pre-K through 12, for continuity, professional development. It's not uncommon. What is uncommon is doing all these different calendars. And again, I've worked in 5 different districts. There are nuances, but in all of the places I worked as a teacher, as an administrator, as a superintendent, a single common calendar, which, by the way, our interlocal agreement doesn't require, but it encourages us to have a single calendar. In short, Marie, yes, I'd like to see a single calendar. There are going to be some differentiations that we can outline in the calendar, and it's typically done that way in a single format. I know that when I arrived here, we were, I don't know how many it was, Selena could tell me, but I think we were at least 4 or 5 at a minimum, different calendars. I don't know how we do consistent professional development and networking with that many calendars. And I do not believe we need to have a K-8 and a 9 through 12 calendar. None of the districts that in Hancock County do it that way. Not to say that we have to do it that way, but I think for continuity for our parents, for our staff, and I think it's really important we get to a single calendar.
So that was a goal of ours, was to try and move to a single calendar for the continuity. So to answer Marie's question, what's been attached to the agenda, we are looking at a K-12 MDI RSS AOS 91 calendar. Okay.
Thanks. That's what I was asking, because I know up until this point, we've had 2 calendars and this is just one.
There have been some small nuance differences, but yes,
Right.
our whole
Two
goal
physical
was to
calendars and
move. Yep.
yes. I may have forgotten my question. I think it was, I'll have to come back to you. I apologize.
Todd, I saw your hand. It's not up anymore, but did you have a question? Yep.
I guess I had asked this before, and I guess I'll just ask it again. We're talking about reduced class time. I think that's a trigger subject. But I guess I need to, because I'm sitting here trying to make the best choice, the best decisions for the AOS and for our teachers and our students. I guess I need more clarity and more information on why are we choosing to reduce the class time? And we don't seem to be focusing on the workload of our teachers and efficiency of our professional days, and finding a way to help them get what they need without reducing that class time. I haven't heard enough, and maybe I'm missing something completely here. I don't think I am, but I haven't heard enough that says that the teachers don't want that. And so if it's out there, then I haven't heard it. I guess we need to communicate that better. But I just need more clarity on why we're not focusing on the workload of our teachers. I mean, Marie talked about that. It's really concerning to me that they feel they need more time. There's a lot of things on their plate. We keep adding more and more. We keep adding professional development and new topics and subjects for them to focus on. And that's concerning to me. And I'd like to, I guess I need more clarity on why we're not focusing more on that need. And we're focusing on this reduced class time.
So I think, I mean, I think those are great questions. And I think that's part of the reason that there's this, pullback. Again, I go back to what I said, there's 2 calendars here. We're not making a decision. It's showing the spectrum. But my understanding from my conversations with Mark is that he might propose something, maybe it's a single early release a month, but that we need to put together a subcommittee to take a look at this. And then it's going to take into consideration many of those points you've made. It's also going to take into consideration, we keep talking about planning time. That's a negotiated item. We're in a negotiations period. We need to identify what's negotiated items and put that where it belongs. And then we need to identify the other concerns, professional development, some of the collaboration, and then put that where it goes. So I don't actually know you're going to get your answer right now, because I think that work needs to be, we need to, again, have this subcommittee sit down and identify those pieces and answer those questions, and then figure out, okay, you've asked the question of why are we taking students out of the classroom? Right? Is there another way to go about this so that they don't lose classroom time?
I agree. But we did go that direction. So we must have made somewhere, we decided that was the best direction to go in, because I'm hearing that this is the best decision that we could make. And I guess I was just trying to understand what was that catalyst that said, no, this is the direction to go. If I'm not going to get that answer today, I guess I'm not. But I want clarity on, we went down that path. What was it that said focus on class time, not teachers' workload?
Right. And I don't have that answer. And my guess is probably we could get a bunch of different answers. If we poll everybody, we could probably get several different answers. I can gander a guess, but again, you might not get your answer tonight. I'm going to move, John Eisenhower has his hand up.
I just want to, in response to that comment, we've hired as a board, a dedicated bunch of education professionals. And I'm relying on them and their experience. None of us are, well, it is our job to be informed board members and to make these decisions, and to make these decisions in the end on the calendar. I, as a board member, am highly reliant on these professionals that I have come to trust a great deal. And I'm putting a great weight on the information they're giving us. I do not expect to have 25 hours of data given to me. I rely on them to process this information and to give us their professional opinions.
Thank you, John.
That's it.
Thank you. Carrie Hayes.
Thank you. I would just like to say, I really feel strongly about the equity piece on the early release days. I've supported 100% if we can figure out a way to make sure that the kids can be at the school with activities. And I think that could be a huge advantage for our kids, for them to have an opportunity to learn in different ways, some experiential learning, some nature learning, some activity, physical activity that gets their brain stimulated. Some of the comments that I saw in the surveys, there were people saying that some of those ed techs would love to work with the kids on some different projects where they get to work with groups of kids, community members. All those things have been brought up, but I feel like that is a huge piece of it, that we have got to make sure that every single kid has an opportunity to be at school through that time frame and have activities that are stimulating them in different ways. I just don't think it's fair to the families to ask them to come up with something to do with their kids on early release days on a regular basis. That said, I would love to hear from some of the elementary principals on how they feel about the plan. I know that there's, that one of the things is trying to really work on the standards learning that we have told our teachers and our administrators that is our focus, and that they need the time for those kind of meetings. So can we ask some of our principals to chime in?
We definitely can. We did hear from them last time. I'm happy to have more comment. There really isn't a plan in front of us too. So there's just the two ends of the calendar. But are there any principals that want to chime in with respect to what Carrie's asking? I'm sort of scrolling.
I can chime in if you want, Heather. It's Crystal.
Hey, Crystal. Okay.
Hi. I think that one of the best things we do as a district already, Carrie, and I think you've got those experiences from your own children, is that experiential learning that a lot of districts seek to find outside of their regular school day is actually embedded in our school day, which is why I think our kids and our families would have a hard time, losing any time, because our teachers and our staff do such a good job making sure it is experiential, right? Kids have hands-on learning, they've got visual learning, they've got auditory learning, they're learning with all aspects, right? And that's one of the hard decisions we have, right? Is to take any time away from student learning because we've worked so hard to make it amazing. And I think Matt said that in the beginning. We're so lucky to be in this district and to be to a place in a district that can go to the next level. And there's a lot of struggling districts that are just trying to get to where we are now. What we're talking about when we talk about like moving forward and next steps is about the standard-based learning, is about taking kids and allowing them the pathways, allowing them choice, allowing them to excel in all different areas, not kind of be learning math at third grade level because you're in third grade, right? Or learning the science topic of astronomy because that's your topic right now, when really your passion is something different. It's really about providing those pathways younger, right? So not just when they get to high school, they can choose geometry or algebra first. They can choose psychology, or they can choose different things. Well, in elementary school, you're getting all of them chosen for you. So in a standards-based model, you allow the students to really drive the instruction. You allow the students to help teach the teachers where to go. And we've done a really good job as a district trying to transition from standard-based, right? From where we reference that standard-based to trying to tip that scale. And the board kind of supported that movement, right? To accepting that we want to be a standard-based place. And how we do that is building in time to train our teachers, which we do. That's one of the main goals of our professional development days. And then allow our students to take advantage of that so families and the community can see the benefit. But it's a hard line. And I think that's where we are right now with the 2 calendars. Maybe there is no right answer for us as a district right now, but there's a pathway forward. And I think that's what you're going to see with the proposal, is that we've really thought about all of those elements and really what's going to be best for our kids so they don't lose anything in the end. But we still move forward as a district to give them the best learning experience we can.
Thank you, Crystal. I have Jessica Stewart has her hand up.
My question is quick, which is just to say, what would it take us to get to the point of what Carrie was just saying, where we could say, like, whether we do early release in K-8 or not, we are going to make sure that we are covered, that the district is going to be taking care of what kids are doing during providing the programming for kids during that time, so that then that would take a whole piece of this discussion out of the equation of like, it would just tie up that loose end.
Mm-hmm. Marie, hang on just a second. I just wanted to see if there's any principals that want to. Mark, do you want to respond to that?
We just can't build it overnight. Literally, it would have to be networking with our community partners. And I just kudos to Gloria and her staff, what she did. But if that is the dynamic, and I'm not saying it is or it isn't, there will be folks that will miss out on those opportunities. And that is something to consider. I think this opportunity to step back and come up with a middle ground approach will allow us to build out that programming with our community partners, and not also take off the table the opportunity, if we can do it without taking away professional development for instructional staff, ed techs and others, the opportunity to have some of those programs within schools. I don't know if that answers the question, Jessica, but I think.
Yes, I should have clarified that. I didn't necessarily mean that the existing staff would do it, but that time would be programmed, whether it was through community partners or whatever, that it wouldn't be a parent responsibility. That's all I really meant.
Thank you, Jessica. Marie.
So just sort of piggybacking off what Jessica said is that, and that was sort of what I was trying to get at before, is that I'm concerned that so one of the things about the AOS is the bonuses, right, is that it's a support system. One of the things it does. It's clear that in the high school scheduling, there are some ways to get 2 problems solved. 1, kids sleeping later. 2, teachers getting more time part of that time is teachers getting some more professional development time. In the elementary schools is different, and to put the burden of that, it cannot be solved clearly with a schedule change that is palatable or that works for a community and is equitable for all of our K-8 families. So I'm concerned that we as an AOS have, like Jessica said, we've got to be able to fill that gap, when add some help, structure, make a commitment. I don't know what it is, but it can't be solved. Maybe at MDES it was able to be solved with scheduling, but it doesn't readily look like it can be solved with just a simple scheduling change, or not so simple, complex scheduling change that they had at each school. So I feel like we have an obligation to recognize that and put some resources towards that, whether it's just committing that we will do that or what. So I just want to reiterate that. It's, again, I know we want to get a single calendar, but I would say, once again, a single calendar may not really meet or recognize the inherent differences that the K-8 schools have versus what the high school has. And I would hate to shoehorn, not that I'm saying we're shoehorning it, but can't think of another word. I would hate to do that just to make sure that we're being consistent without recognizing the differences in programming and the differences in the families at the two different schools.
Thank you, Marie. Good point, and I think well taken. Thank you. Are there any other questions before we move on? John.
It occurs to me that the whole idea of schools, and I fully support that if we do the early dismissal of K-8 on Wednesdays, that I think it would be great if there were programs set up that the schools had programmed and made available to families to use. Problem being, though, of course, none of that's in any of our budgets and won't be. So I can't imagine that will actually happen for next year. So that should be part of all of our decisions and making process. That's it.
Thank you, John. All right, I'm going to move the agenda on. And I think I appreciate everybody's comments, their questions. I think they're very, well, I think everybody's on target and has identified some real concerns that are, global for the K-8 and for our community members and our parents. So I appreciate that. And I know Mark's heard it. Some of it's been reiterated, which to me, that just further emphasizes its importance. Mark, do we have any other business?
None at this time, Heather, that I have, other than you have future agenda items. And if I may, we'll have a recommendation to come in April on the calendar. And also, if I may, we are working on bringing a presentation through our crisis response team on the issue of social emotional supports for our students. And so we'll have information for the board then in April on that piece as well, and a presentation.
Great, thank you. All right.
Heather?
Yes.
You also asked me, I can do it or not do it. I have it prepared. You asked for a short overview of what we learned from the winter administration of the NWEAs and the DRAs and the HLAs. These are all acronyms I will explain.
Yep.
That, to check in on how those measures show how our kids are doing. If you'd like that report, I'd be happy to do that. And then I would follow that by visiting with local boards and giving them data about their particular school.
Okay, Julie, I'm putting that on for future agenda items. And as Mark and I build out that agenda, but yeah, we'll place that.
It'll be short, but if you want it, I'm prepared to do it. If we need to delay it, that's up to the board.
Okay, great, thank you. Yep, so our next meeting is Monday, April 12th. Time hasn't been set just because the agendas haven't been set, but that will be coming out, I think, early next week. We'll have all that put together between the high school and this agenda. Next, we need to go into an executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA subsection 4056D contract negotiations. I will take a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Todd.
Second, Jessica.
Thank you, Jessica. I will go through the voting. Todd Graham.
Approve.
Teresa King Leclerc.